Greetings, students, and welcome back to Chapter 11, Keywords and Concepts. We'll be burning through a lot of sections, all those little tiny sections. So we're back to every psychologist's favorite study, the Minnesota study of twins reared apart, where they took twins, identical genetic twins, who were not raised together, and studied them. We learned so much from these studies. So researchers found that identical twins, whether they were raised by the same parents or raised in completely different households, had remarkably similar personalities. And these findings really do suggest that there is a heritability of some personality traits. What do I mean by heritability? Well, heritability is the proportion of difference among people that is attributed to genetics. So sometimes people are different because they've learned different things, they come from different cultures, they have different values. But sometimes people are different because their DNA is different. So we've talked about all kinds of likelihoods and whether you're going to do this or that. Some people are more likely to be athletic than others, right? That's heritability. Some people are more likely to be really good at art, heritability. So that's what the study showed us, that there was definitely a genetic component to our personalities. And another type of personality scientist are trait theorists. And they believe that personality can actually be understood via approaching it as a collection of traits, right? All people have certain traits or characteristic ways of behaving, and if you identify those specific traits, you can trace them back to the type of person, the type of personality. Okay, so that's trait theorists. And then moving into our last slide here. Getting a little bit into culture, because all of this is widely influenced by culture. So culture is all the beliefs, customs, art, traditions, everything of a particular society, right? And your textbook talks about two different broad types of culture. They talk about individualist cultures, which tend to believe that things like independence, competition, and personal achievement are incredibly important. We live in an individualist culture, right? So that's the US, that's Australia, that's the UK. A lot of Europe would be an individualist culture. That's as opposed to a collectivist culture. A collectivist culture values social harmony, respectfulness, and group needs over individual needs. And you're going to see collectivist attitudes are far more common in places like Asia, Africa, and South America. These values really do influence personality, right? So if you live in a culture that doesn't believe in competition, and you're incredibly ambitious and you are constantly messing people over to succeed, you're probably not going to be the most popular person in that culture. But here in America, in an individualist culture, you'll probably have your own TikTok channel, right? That's how it's different. And then I have one of the ways that we measure personality, because it's kind of hard to do, and that's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, or the MMPI. And it's one of the most widely used personality inventories. So it's a boatload of questions, and responses are scored to produce a clinical profile compared of 10 scales. Now, there's a list of the 10 scales in your textbook. You're welcome to look at it if you would like. But examples of the types of scales that they're placing you on would be like your level of depression, how masculine or feminine you are, your level of paranoia, etc. So things like this. We also learned about 5-factor with those 5 personality traits, and you can measure how much of each of those you have, but we're just focusing on the MMPI for this week. All right, I'll see you in the next video.